Well, the wife's at work. I'm off work for the day, and I'm welcoming you back to Hawkeye's House of Horrors. And before I get to it, I thought I should do it. I added up a picture here of a friend of mine, a real great friend. Um, he was my best friend. Um, his name's Todd or Flawed. He's passed away, but he was a gigantic horror fan. And that was one of the loves we shared together, as well as sports, but was film. He loved horror films. This one in particular, it's not exactly one that he raved about or completely loved, but he was definitely totally into Stephen King and even influenced him to be a writer as well. But I thought I should put a picture of Todd up there. We called him Flawed. He was a huge horror fan, so eh, I thought that's what I'm going to do. So, anyways, I'm going to bring to you next on my list from 1980 horror films. Top of the list, the best of, in my opinion, that I've seen. This one is totally nostalgic for me. I first saw it when I was 12 years old with my best friend at the time, Kevin. Um, I think when the third act rolled around, John showed up and we watched it, and I didn't know what was going to happen, so it worked on me. And that is Friday the 13th by Sean S. Cunningham. He directed this one. Now, I must say, the other horror films that I'm reviewing, they're coming in nice and short for me. They're not running around 45 minutes like some of the science fiction films I was talking about. But this one is going to be a little bit longer. There's a lot of things for me to talk about. And I don't know how many times I've seen this flick over the years. Could it be 50? I'm not sure. Um, but this one's really good to me. But I'm going to go through um, some of the good, and yeah, there's some of the bad. There's everything about this film isn't top notch to me, but in the end, what works in this film, it really works and really brings it to another level. Now, as I said, Sean S. Cunningham was the director of this film. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he produced it as well. He was a producer, was buddies with Wes Craven, and I actually worked with him on other projects such as Last House on the Left, which I believe was 1972. Um, but at the time, he had seen how well John Carpenter's Halloween had done. Low budget, kicked ass at the box office. Um, so he wanted to cash in on that wave, if you will, of slashers. So, um, from what I understand, he wanted to rip off Halloween. And rip it off he did, and did it really well in creating his own uh, long running series of horror films that, in the end, has its own flair, its own flavor, perhaps. But he was very successful in doing that. Now, from what I found out as well, Cunningham had actually had the title Friday the 13th. He was wanting to use that as a title of his horror film, much like Halloween, and using uh, well, I shouldn't say holiday, but uh, a special time of the year, I guess that's scary, Friday the 13th. But, anyways, he had the title before he even had a script. And supposedly he put it in a magazine, if I'm not mistaken, to see if there was any pushback. Didn't receive any, so he ran away with it and ran away with using that title for his film. Now, Cunningham brought his old buddy in, Victor Miller, to pen the script for him. Now, the two had worked together previously on other Cunningham projects. Um, they were Here Come the Tigers and Nanny's Orphans. Now, Cunningham before this had done family pictures. It was almost like wannabe Disney movies. I've never seen them, but that's the vibe I get from these films. Um, so Miller had wrote those films as well for him. Now, I had seen pictures of the Friday the 13th script, and actually Cunningham's name himself is on there. So I'm not sure if he took a kick at it in writing some of the script as well. But I found Ron Kurz, who would go on to write the second part, this Friday the 13th Part 2, came in and did some rewrites on the script as well, uncredited. So with the budget of only 550,000 back in 1979, Sean S. Cunningham was off to New Jersey to film this Friday the 13th, and hoping he would bounce back some money that's been put in the film. And yeah, it did that. It did that quite well. Uh, Released on May the 9th, 1980, it went on to gross 59.8 million bucks at the box office. That is tremendous. Now, when I put that into my trusty, rusty calculator, in today's dollars, that would come out to $222.8 million. That's amazing that a movie with such a small budget performed so well. So Cunningham, due to Halloween, was able to really amazingly kick the doors down on the slasher, and just that became a craze at that point, making slasher films to try and make the money that Halloween and Friday the 13th had already. Now, to go through a plot of the film, um, and Friday the 13th is not known for plots, I'll let you know, but this one is got a little bit more plot maybe than other entries. It's also known as Camp Blood back in town, this particular camp. And as Crazy Ralph says, it's got a death curse. And you meet Crazy Ralph along the way, and he's even in part two as well. Now, as we see right at the beginning of the film, even back in 1958, we see a murder of a couple of camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake. And you also see they were even extremely horny back in 1958 as well. Um, the murder then, of course, it goes unsolved. And we fast forward 20 years to the present, or, well, 1980. And that very camp hasn't been closed down. And, as I said, it's got a bit of a death curse. It's known as Camp Blood due to the murders that happened there. But it's now being reopened by Steve Christie, here played by Peter Brower, who puts in a good performance. So he's going to be bringing in some counselors to help him get the place back in shape for the opening, and try and get this camp working again, and having kids enjoy their summer at the camp. But as you know, this is a horror film, so the camp counselors, well, they start getting killed off one by one. But there is a question: who's committing these murders? Now, I hope you have seen this film, because I'm going to go through it. It's kind of like Empire Strikes Back. I hope you've seen this film by now, and if you haven't, go watch it. Um, the other Friday the 13th films, it was Jason Voorhees who was the killer, and it was no question. You knew who the killer was. But in this first film, you don't know who the killer is. So, as I said, like, it was like horribly influenced by Halloween, um, in being a slasher. But I find um, how it's written, and the way it comes out, and not even knowing who the killer is it's very much like an Italian giallo as well. Now, yeah, in comparison, this is nowhere near as good as Dario Argento or Mario Bava giallos, but it definitely follows uh, that influence in my mind as well. I mean, you don't have the dark black leather glove. You see it stabbing someone. That is totally like Argento did that all the time. But you don't see who the killer is. So there is a big question into who the killer is. But And I'll get to that in a bit. It fails at that. It doesn't work all that great as a giallo, but it's really good as a slasher. Now, in figuring out who's committing these murders, though, we find out that a young boy named Jason Voorhees has drowned in the lake. Uh, when he wasn't being watched by camp counselors, he drowned. So, in the end, it is his mother that is committing these murders and treating these counselors that are just there with Steve Christie like they're the ones who let her son drown. Now, as I said, the first time I saw it, I think I was 12. I might have been 11. It was one or the other. But to tell you the truth, the first time I saw this movie, I hated it. Um, I had seen, I know I'd seen at least one other Friday the 13th movie. So I knew who Jason Voorhees was, but I didn't quite know the whole story of him and his mother. So when I was watching this film, it absolutely was playing out like a Friday the 13th, but in my mind, I was expecting it's going to be Jason. And that's my own fault for thinking that or wanting that, really. When I found out it wasn't, I enjoyed the shock. I enjoyed the surprise, but I still wanted it to be Jason. It took some further viewings and like right on to the next viewing, I was enjoying it more and more and more until I said, "Yeah, that's really good." I took it for what it was, in being the first, the original entry in the series, and I think older folk who watch this film, this might be their favorite Friday the 13th film. Is the original. Me, it's not. I think there were some others that came later that were better. But in saying that, I still think this was really good. And it's interesting as well because when I was a kid watching all these, I liked all the Friday the 13th movies until I saw Jason Goes to Hell. And then I didn't like that one at all. And I still don't. But uh, in watching more horror films, more slasher movies, all that, some of those films have definitely dropped off my list, and they're not so good, really. Um, but yeah, when I was a kid watching horror films, it was pretty much I liked them all because it was kind of almost forbidden. I shouldn't be watching that. Now, as I was saying, like this series of films, and then a lot of it starts here, and I'm going to share with you certain things that were continued on in the series. Um, for example, and this is taken straight out of Halloween or the beginning of Halloween, but hey, it really works effectively in horror films, is the POV, the point of view. You're getting it from the killer. You see the killing sometimes from their point of view, or with the dark, foreboding music, which I'm going to get to later. Um, it's from that point of view, and it really works well, and it continues on through the series. But as I said, it was taken from Halloween, but I also remember Bob Clark's Black Christmas did this as well back in 1974. And that was really effective too, using the point of view of the killer as well. Now, other staples that start here in the original film are such things as the final girl having the final survivor face off against, in this one, it's Jason's mother. Um, but also in the third act, finding all of the bodies of those with her that are murdered, which also I remember that in Halloween as well, where Jamie Lee Curtis's character finds at least one or two of the bodies while being chased by Michael Myers. Now, getting into the writing of the film, the characters in the film, and I'm certainly going to get to their names and who portrayed these characters. in the original one, I thought they were okay. They're, unfortunately, in the end, nothing to write home about. Um, I personally found right in the next entry in part two, the characters were written better. In this one, yeah, they're passable. For me, there's not enough um, of a difference between each of the characters to stand them apart, to know exactly who is who, other than I'll get to some basics of the characters when I talk about them. But I think in part two, like I mean, that also wasn't like, oh my gosh, it's like Shakespeare. But and in fact, I think the characters were better going forward in the series until about Friday the 13th, part seven. Then the characters are, well, they're extremely hollow, not terribly well written. So the characters of the film, there's Alice, who is or becomes the final girl. She's played by Adrienne King. Steve Christie actually likes her, would like to have a relationship with her, but I can tell right when he shows this to the audience and her, I don't think she likes him in that way at all. There's also Annie, played by Robbie Morgan, who's going to be the cook. She's really bubbly. Um, there's Bill, played by Harry Crosby. Yes, the son of the Bing Crosby, which is really cool because at the end of the film, uh, there's a piano. They actually have a music book of Bing Crosby's songs, so that's hilarious to me. Um, there's Brenda, played by Laurie Bartram. There's Ned. Oh, by the way, Brenda, I found her a bit of a know-it-all, a little bit. There's Ned, played by Mark Nelson. He's the jokester, the trickster. And then there's Jack, played by Kevin Bacon, who at this time was relatively unknown, although he at this point had been in John Landis's National Lampoon's Animal House, and I love that film. And then finally, there's Marcy, played by Janine Taylor, and the two of them, they're a couple. So let's try that again. Jack and Marcy, they're a couple. Now, the best performance in the film, without any doubt, is by Betsy Palmer, who plays Pamela Voorhees, who, interestingly, I don't think they even mention her name in this. I think it's just Mrs. Voorhees or Jason's mother. I feel she did a great job in this, and she does a great job in not just finding that threshold, really, and not becoming too campy or too hammy or too over the top. Um, Now, I seen in an interview, Palmer actually called this film shit, which is funny because, in my eyes, for anyone who's like 50 years old or younger, this is the role they likely know her as is Jason's mother. And I think she did the role for a car as well. She needed to buy a car, and this film was offered to her, so she said, "Hey, what the hey, I'll do it for the car." Um, but um, as I found out, she wasn't the first one for this role to be offered to. It was also offered to Estelle Parsons and Shelley Winters. They both turned the role down due to the violence that was in the picture. They both would have been amazing in it. Personally, I think Estelle Parsons would have been tremendous in the role. Um, but I find it rather funny. She found the film too violent, but was in Bonnie and Clyde. And when that film came out, I think it was known as an extremely violent film. And she went on to win an Oscar in that film. Now, one thing this film does that's really good to me is um, really the setting of the picture. It's not like there's just one setting in the film, but a vast majority of the film just takes place on the camp. So you get to know the camp. In addition, you um, as I said, the characters are okay, but at the same time, you get you get to feel a camaraderie between them all, and they don't know each other for very long, but they're all the same age. They're teenagers. They're up to mischief. They're all into the same things. You feel like you get to know them a bit, or a part of that little community that's been created in this camp. And for that, I totally give that kudos to the writer Victor Miller, as well as Cunningham, the director, and the actors, in bringing that forward in the picture. Now, with this film, I will definitely give you my opinion on where she stands, because in every Friday the 13th film, there's a final girl. And I'm not sure, she probably has, because she was able to, well, kick ass in the end. I think Alice is sort of maybe thought by some people to be a strong final girl, where in my opinion, I'm not saying she's poor, but I think in further entries in the series, the final girl got better. She was able to use her skills, her smarts, in defeating the villain, where in this one it's sort of, she's just sort of given multiple chances to escape, or in the end pick up the machete to chop off her head. Um, so she's not poor, but she's just given a lot of opportunities to finally act on it, if you will. Now, I'm definitely going to get to the music now, and it was done by Harry Manfredini. He was chosen to do the music, and everybody gives us a nod and says, "Yeah, this is a good soundtrack." Um, I'm personally, I'm even going to say, I don't know if it gets enough credit for what it does. Without the score to this film, it would not be anywhere near as scary or creepy as it is. If you had a different score, I don't know if the jumps would be as effective as they are, because in the end, these films are very much a jump scare type of horror movie. And I'll talk about it at the end. There's a absolutely terrific jump scare at the end. And even in the end, the killer has its own theme, which was then borrowed by Jason, if you will. And when I was a kid, I always thought it was like something like that. But I found out it was actually meaning kill mom. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, I have heard other Manfredini scores, and I think he did a lot for other Cunningham pictures. Um, and while they're good as well, they're really, really reminiscent of this score. And I'm not even sure if this is the first score that Manfredini did that was reminiscent of Friday the 13th, if that makes any sense. But it works so well here. This is where, in my mind, that's a Friday the 13th score. And it works amazingly with what you're brought to the screen by Cunningham. Now, the final big plus to this film are the effects. They're done by Tom Savini, and he was hired to do the effects for this film, Friday the 13th. And I have talked about him in a previous review I did for Maniac, that he did for William Lustig. He did the effects for that as well. I'm not sure which film came first, but by this point, he had already done George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead, had been known, and was really a sought out effects guy. And he didn't really look to make, hey, I just make big budget movies at this point or at any point in his career. I love how he worked for low budget. He must have found it more challenging, um, and maybe he was in the end more proud of the effects he did with a lower budget. He did definitely go on to make films that were bigger budget, like I believe Day of the Dead was not a low budget film, but in this one, like Maniac, he must have been pretty proud of what he was able to do because, in my mind, some of the effects stand up really well. And in addition, in my mind, this very film may have spearheaded the American films to finally get into the gore. The Italian films were much, much gorier than the American films at this point, but it may have been through Savini that American films were now showing much more graphic detail in their gore. So I'm going to go through my favorite four kills in the film. Now, before I do that, I must say the kills in general in this film are a plus and a minus. And it may be due to budgetary reasons because some of the kills you don't even see. They're not even on screen. And you had Tom Savini there. But I wonder because it was such a low budget, they only had enough money for him to work on particular um, kills, unless they were done and it was cut from the film. But I think it would have been much more effective to see it um, than just imagining what happens because it's I don't know that what they were going for was for you to see this happen in front of you. Now, they are, as I said, first off, the one I already talked about, Jason's mother gets her head chopped off by Alice. That's right at the end of the film. It's crazy and shocking the first time I saw that, and it's infamous that kill to Friday the 13th fans. And yeah, it was extremely graphic as well. Now, the other three are in order of how they happen in the film. There's Annie, happens right near the beginning of the film. Um, she has her throat slit, and I think that's still stands up very well, a very effective gore effect, as well as Jack, played by Kevin Bacon. He's laying on the bed, and it's like a spear or an arrow is punched through his throat, um, and then blood starts to gush. Uh, Very effective as well, kill. And then finally, there's Marcy, um, which leads to uh, one thing as well Friday the 13th is known for, but they once again took that from Halloween. If you do bad things, you're going to get killed and die. Like in this one, they do drugs, they have sex, they even drink, they even play strip Monopoly. And in this one, Marcy's in the bathroom. Um, it's kind of weird, kind of funny in my mind, because this is like after her and Jack have had sex. She's going to the bathroom and she's now in the women's bathroom or girls' bathroom, um, going to the bathroom. But she's in there in her undies and she hears a noise. And in my mind, I would be like, okay, I remember Ned. That is something Ned would do. But she's like just walking around and then whoosh, opens up a shower curtain. And I'm like, in my mind, I was like, what if that was Ned? But it's not. It's the killer who's making this sound and scares her. It's also kind of funny and a little bit silly, but I let it fly where she just is like a little bit too long, and then the axe flies and hits her in the face for a very cool, effective kill as well. Now, you may not care. I know in the end I don't. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert hated this flick. I think they hated almost all horror films. They loved Halloween, but they hated this film. Siskel actually gave the address of Betsy Palmer out to people for them to write her or bother her. I think that was a dickhead move because I thought she put in the best performance, and I actually enjoy the film as well. Yeah, as well. I've got a book by Leonard Maltin. He gave this a 1.5 star. He didn't like this film. He liked it maybe a little bit more than Siskel and Ebert, but he wasn't a fan of this film There's, either. Images in this film that I like. Um, I like the images of the woods and the water. It works very well when they show it. It's not overused, but it's really effective in the scenes that are where those images are in. There's also a scene I thought it was really cool where they pick up an axe in a bed and it's covered in blood. I thought that was very cool. There's also a scene where Brenda is going to bed, but she's reading a book before she goes to bed, and she hears a little boy yelling, "Help me!" She then gets up. It's like pouring rain. She goes outside looking for this kid that's yelling to her, um, leading her to the archery range, which her introduction was her at the archery range, and then her ending is also at the archery range. But unfortunately, she dies off screen. If they showed her kill on screen, personally, I think this would have been um, a bigger scene, maybe that people talk about or think about. Maybe people like that scene as much as I do, but I think it would have been even better, and it would have been one of the better scenes in the film. But unfortunately, her kill is off screen. So yeah, and as I wrote, it would have been more like a true knockout scene rather than it just sort of being shuffled into the film like it is in the end. Now I'm going to talk about the end of the film. This is actually after Mrs. Voorhees has been killed by Alice. Uh, and from what I heard, this was Tom Savini's idea due to the film Carrie by Brian De Palma. He loved the jump scare at the end of that film and felt that this film needed that type of jump scare. And boy, does it deliver. Alice is in a canoe. Uh, it's got some really good music by Manfredini as well in the background, different than the music in the rest of the film. It's almost got this um, nice music where you feel that everything is okay, everything's great, the villain is dead. The cops are there shouting at her. She's just waking up in the canoe, uh, just slowly putting her hand in the water, just sort of like slowly waking up. And then Jason, the boy, jumps out of the water, grabs her, and pulls her into the lake with different Manfredini music where it's very much like Psycho. Uh, and it's extremely effective. And the first time I saw it, I was just, my jaw was dropped. I was like, that is a cool ending. Wow, what a way to end a film right there. But it wasn't the ending. They then tacked on an ending where Alice wakes up in the hospital and talks to the cop about her being pulled into the lake, and the cop saying there's no boy in the lake, and all this and all that, and it was garbage and it didn't work and it was just tacked on. And in my mind, oh man, I really wish they didn't put that on the end. Just end the film with Jason pulling her in the water. What an ending that would have been to this film. In the end, though, if they did that, uh, and they would have cashed in exactly had they, not put that on the ending that they did, they still would have cashed in mega on this film. Would the sequel have actually involved a rotting child running around in like bathing shorts, running around killing people? That would have been a lot different than you got. And that could have been cool too, but hey, that's not what you got. But anyways, in addition, as I saw in the credits, I saw this many times ago, but the associate producer as well as the unit production manager was Steve Miner, who went on to direct parts 2 and 3. Now, whew, how many sequels are there to Friday the 13th? Anybody out there? Do you know? You? Okay, so there's Friday the 13th 1 through 10, or X. Then there was Freddy versus Jason, uh, which would be technically part 11. And then there was the remake. So there you have it. Now, some of these films, I'm not going to do a review right away for Friday the 13th Part 2. I'm going to wait till I believe it's the following year, 1981, because that is on my list, within my list of the best horror films of 1981. And personally, I think it's even better than the first one. Now, what I am going to do though, I'm going to start putting reviews to other films on here, but at some point near the end of getting to everything in 1980, I will do a review for the remake of Friday the 13th. I have seen it once. I just saw it a few days ago, and I must say I was pleasantly surprised. Um, I thought it wasn't that bad at all, actually. One I might enjoy watching again. So I'll watch it a second time and give you a review for that. But anyways, that ends my review for Friday the 13th. And I was more than happy to give this to you. So anyways, have yourself an excellent night.